Let's talk about Houston, Texas for a minute, because what is happening there, I think, is affecting a lot of people across this country, and that is particularly Harris County, Texas. And I want to bring an issue to light here because we're seeing this, and when it comes to our elections, when it comes to trusting our elections, when it comes to auditing our elections, it's amazing how the cry for it tends to fall on deaf ears amongst politicians and people who can get something done about it. Alexandra Mueller she was the Republican candidate that ran for Harris County judge. I want to welcome her on to the show. Alex, welcome. How are you doing, first of all?
Yeah, doing pretty well, and thanks for having me on. So,
well, you've got an interesting thing going on. There's Alex. We can see her now. You've called for an audit on the election. You lost, quote unquote, to one of my least favorite people, and certainly one of my least favorite Texans, in Lina Hidalgo, who is the Democrat who is a Harris County judge. And you've asked for, the Texas Secretary of State, who is a Republican, Jane Nelson, to audit this Harris County election. It seems to fall on deaf ears. What is wrong with the Republicans in Texas? What is going on with this audit that's not happening?
So, and that's the thing. The audit's already been authorized. So I'm just asking them to complete it in months, not years. Mm-hmm. So 2020, Harris County was supposed to be an extensive forensic audit. It wasn't released till the month after my election, so not too helpful there.
Yeah.
And the kind of gist was, because our Texas election code laws, we don't really have any requirement for preservation of evidence. So Harris County, controlled by progressives, just didn't turn over the records. State tried to do an audit. You wait 2 years, not much to actually be able to audit. And so they did find some pretty egregious violations of kind of chain of custody. But at the end of the day, the report said we didn't really have enough information to audit. So they released that in December 22. Right when we had a new legislative session, Abbott appointed Jane Nelson to be Secretary of State. He had already called on an investigation. And what I've been asking, I reach out to pretty much every office holder. What have you guys heard? It's not something that I just decided to try to take a cheap shot to take one. It's this idea that we're literally coming up on a year since the election, and the only kind of definitive report on what happened happens to cite the Astros for a lot of the problems. That, hey, we had a championship parade, so, sorry that a lot of these Republican polls didn't get to open on time. And I just think it's embarrassing. And just from sitting in this, I obviously follow all the public statements and the news clippings, and there's no shortage of Republican politicians that are willing to be kind of the big man and make a tweet. But it's like, a teenage girl can tweet. What I need you to do is put the full weight and power of your office to affect some sort of change or action. And that's what's just frustrating. It's like, oh yeah, they always talk about Texas Rangers, and even election day, you can pull, there's all these articles that said, hey, Texas is going to send all these monitors down here because we know we had a really disastrous primary March. Then Lina issues a press statement. I'm going to get the DOJ down. And at the end of the day, you find out just nobody ever comes. So a lot of tweets, a lot of press releases, and then literally no follow through in a way that would all be effective. And what's been frustrating is, just a private citizen, I'm up against Lina Hidalgo's attorneys, unlimited taxpayer. She's using your dime, has extremely good legal counsel. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to self-fund, through kind of a little bit of donors and activists, keeping this lawsuit alive that they've been very successful in dragging out. Today was exciting. The first of about 20 election challenges just went to trial. But I just spent 9 months, and we're getting to our first trial. It's like, what kind of remedy is that?
Yeah.
And we still don't know what happened. The only government report is from Harris County, and it said the problems on election day were a he said, she said game. Even though, there's actual records they can cite, but they haven't. And so that's just my point, is trying to, raise awareness that we need actual leadership. This cannot just be talking points. The election code is the law. Everybody agrees they didn't follow the law. When you don't follow the code, you don't follow the law. Where different kind of people on the spectrum disagree is what was the extent, what was the outcome. And sort of my point is, well, let's just even figure out what happened, because it's 9 months and it's pretty embarrassing that nobody can actually say, this many polls were turned down, this many opened late. And so that's really, I'm trying to raise awareness because there are very important races coming up. Yeah. And I would not want anyone to be in the position that I was in.
Yeah. Alex, and it was a close election. I mean, if you look at the results as they're reported, this was a close election. This was like a fraction of a difference here between you and Lena. So there's a lot of people that don't care for Lena. Lena is a power-hungry, attention-seeking person who I don't believe has the best interest in Harris County. We've seen her antics over the years, and it's cartoonish in some cases and laughable the way that she tries to position herself and sell herself. So, but this isn't a popularity contest in regards to whether we like Lena Hidalgo. This is a thing where you're looking at an election. There are some discrepancies here. There are things that need to be looked at. It's close enough that it should require an audit. And this is Texas. Texas is known for having a GOP stronghold in Austin. But we have rhinos on parade. We're seeing this with everything. The number one priority of the Texas GOP in this past legislative session was election integrity. And you can't get anybody to move on this thing. What's the deal? I mean, how do we get them to move, Alex?
And I think that's, all of your listeners reading out to their elected office holders, it doesn't matter the name. It's pretty significant how many have told me this is just my problem. And I'm like, well, you're a Republican in Texas. You represent Harris County. You've got a piece of it. And you need to take ownership. But the view from a lot of these office holders is this is just something about you. And I think if you have that sort of a myopic view, this is how we're going to lose Texas, because the Democrats understand the significance of Harris County. You cannot flip the state of Texas just by the numbers for the Democrats if they don't hold Harris County.
Right.
And so by virtue, the counter, if Republicans hold Harris County, there's not enough votes in those other cities that they can overtake it. We are the largest county.
Yeah.
And so while Lena was able to take her whole campaign, hide in the basement, Jill Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Clinton's, all of your kind of B-list Hollywood celebrities, even Jane Fonda, a combat vet, decided to come down, Hanoi Jane, campaign and block walk against me.
Yeah.
But, the general mentality of some of these Republicans is just, listen, Harris County is unwinnable. And it really doesn't matter, but there is significance because all of us lost races very tight. Some of the judges actually even 400 votes. That is a criminal court judge that instead of having these guys out on felony bonds killing more people, could have been enforcing the law. Yeah. Every single one of those judicial actual criminal court seats matters. Every day they're not in that seat, that is another person out on bond who never should have been, taking an innocent life. And instead of having real leaders around us, they just say, well, I'm in an R+30 seat, so my seat is safe. And we know Harris County has problems. Who cares? But it's like, well, in 2024, we're going to have a U.S. Senate race.
Yeah.
Having Harris County be competitive and tight, that means we're going to keep a Republican U.S. Senator. If Harris County turns into a blowout and Republicans in Harris County vote in the same kind of numbers as Dallas, which is very low, we will lose the state.
Yeah.
And so even part of mine is just wanting to show that the state is paying attention and we're going to make it better. But so far, we just had two really bad elections. The March primary was a disaster. They quite literally lost 10,000 ballots, found them a couple of days later. Thankfully, had that election administrator fired, but then we replaced that person with somebody just as incompetent, if not more. And that's kind of some of the reasons even I want to go to trial is like, who found this Clifford Tatum? Here he is, gets plucked out of D.C., only track record, $100,000 in federal tax liens outstanding, and a failed election in D.C. And yet he gets plucked out of D.C. to go run our next election, even though we had two capable election officials that could do it. And then, they interviewed across the country that if you're not seeing that they're tilting things, they're putting their thumb on the scale. I just don't know how to communicate that. And some of the things outside of just the blatant election code violations, they moved popular Republican polling stations.
Yeah.
Where I personally vote downtown, which is the biggest business center, they moved it and put it on a college. And then right after my election, they opened it back. I mean, that's a voting center that had been there for 30 years.
Yeah.
The one Republican commissioner had like almost 20% less of polling locations than the Democrat areas. So all of these kind of little cuts and tweaks, you are intentionally suppressing the vote, aside from just the numerous locations that didn't get ballot paper.
Yeah. And if it's happening in Harris County, Texas, it's happening all across the country. So,
Yes.
Alex, keep up the fight. I'm going to encourage people to support you, follow you. We'll put all the information up and make sure that, because you are in this fight and you're doing it yourself. And I want to say thank you for fighting. This matters, and this matters not just in Harris County, not just in Texas, but across the country. It really does, because this is something that conservatives and Republicans nationwide have been saying, since 2020. They're looking at this thing, saying we've got a problem in our elections. So thank you for doing what you're doing, and God bless you. Thanks for coming on the show, Alex.
God bless, and appreciate the opportunity. Thank you,
Take care.
Chad.
We'll talk soon. Thank you.